Ghost. And the church says, have you ever failed? You know, I thought about this quite a bit, and I decided that I'm I failed a lot in my life. Matter of fact, I couldn't even tell you all the times I failed, all the things I failed at. Couldn't even begin to tell you. Because that's happened to me a lot. Maybe it's happened to you, I don't know. You know, I was thinking about it though. You know, how do we judge failure? How do we judge success? How do we evaluate our life? And how does God evaluate our life? Maybe would be a better question. And as I thought about this a little bit, I thought, you know, was Jesus a failure? I mean, that seems kind of a big statement, doesn't it? Was Jesus a failure? Well, I guess if we kind of laid it out a little bit, how would we say, what would we think? You know, one thing is he had no possessions, right? I mean, he said they wanted to follow him. He says, well, you can come with me, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head, right? When he died upon a cross, the only thing that they were able to had value was his robe that they cast lots for. He had apparently no house, no land. He had apparently no income of his own, no value, earthly value. He never married, as far as we know. Never had children, right? Never had his own family outside of his mother, I guess, and brothers and sisters. Apparently Joseph being passed by the time he was on the cross. He had no family. A lot of times we judge our success by our children, by our prodigy, I guess, by our family. He didn't have that, did he? He didn't have a formal education. Matter of fact, he was accused, right, they were accused of being unlearned, those Galileans, right? Aren't they unlearned and uneducated men, right? Had no title after his name, had no formal carpenter, I guess, son of a carpenter, but didn't have any degree, any formal education. Well, like Paul wasn't raised at the feet of Gamaliel, didn't have that knowledge, right? He was rejected by the very people that he came to save. Am I right? He was rejected by the Jews. Didn't believe him. Didn't listen to him. Most of them didn't accept who he was or what he was preaching. His message was not well received, to say the least. You know, it doesn't look so good, does it? Matter of fact, it gets kind of worse, doesn't it? He was crucified as a common criminal, wasn't he? Hung between two thieves in his death. He seems kind of dismal a little bit, doesn't it? You know, how do we judge success, right? And most of the things I just listed here are things that you and I would judge success by, I think. What we have, what we possess, our family, our education, acceptance of the people around us that love us, right? And it even really goes beyond that, right? He was crucified, common criminal, crucified. I got to grab something I forgot. So if you really kind of look at it in terms of human terms, he really wasn't a successful person in life, it doesn't appear to me. You know, as I thought about that, a lot of people have like trophies in their house. I don't know if you have those. I was never very athletic. Those of you who know me know that. So I really don't have any like athletic trophies. I know people who are good at that. They probably have like baseball trophies. I'm sure Jay has baseball trophies and stuff like that in his house. And Tammy and Martin and John, Teresa, they have like rodeo buckles. That's kind of like a trophy you wear, or shirts that say that on there, right? Brent probably has State Farm awards for being the best insurance salesman in Henrietta or whatever, you know. And we put them on the wall if we're proud of them, right? And people see them, and that's really neat. And I don't have any of those. I have this. This is my trophy right here. When I was at OU many, many years ago, there was this assignment. You had to build this vehicle to go around this track. And you divided the weight of the vehicle by how far it traveled, and that's how you got your grade. So in my little head, I thought, well, I'm going to take this clock, I'm going to cut it all down to this bare, just nothing, because weight's important. And so I machined wheels on the lathe, and I cut this clock down. It had to be powered by a rubber band. So I machined this down, and I welded it up and cut it up and built these little wheels and put my rubber band on there. Thought, man, I had her going, you know. Anyway, I got beat by a guy with a straw and a lid of a cup, you know. And you go, it's this fraternity thing, you know, you. They have access to all this stuff that normal people don't have. And so after all these years, I keep this because it reminds me that no matter sometimes how hard you try, how much you think you got it all figured out, you're going to fail, right? So some people have trophies as their successes, I guess, and I have this old beat-up clock that reminds me that I was last. This is last place right here. Because you need to be reminded sometimes that we fail. And it doesn't matter how hard we try. Doesn't matter how much effort we put into it. Doesn't matter how right we think we are. Things fail. Relationships fail. Right? Sometimes we fail at a job, fail to perform, fail with our children. And as I thought about that, I've had kind of a long life, longer than some. I've got to be careful I say that. Harold gets on to me. Longer than some. And I often thought, what is my greatest failure? You know, if you had to write that down, like your top 10 list, and you had to say, what is my greatest failure? What would that be? Would it be a relationship? Would it be financial? Would it be a job? Would it be an accident maybe that you had? Or what would that be? The greatest failure in your life. What would it be? I really thought about that for a long time, and I don't know that I have the answer. I don't know I have my answer. I think I have a top 3 or 4, but I don't think I have my answer. But when you think about that, sometimes it depresses you, don't you? Have you ever failed in something and you lay awake at night and you play it over in your head and you think, what could I have done different? What could I have done better? Why did I do what I did? Am I the only person in here that does that? But you know, my greatest failure in life has nothing to do with money. It's nothing to do with jobs. And I've had a lot of failures in my life. I just can't stress that enough. They're all running in my head right now, like this little squirrel doing this wheel, right? But you know, the greatest failure in my life is an empty pew. I finally figured that out. You know what keeps me awake at night? It's not jobs, it's not money, it's not anything. You know what keeps me awake at night? This place keeps me awake at night. It's the idea that maybe there's a pew that's empty or somebody that I'm never going to see again because maybe I said something wrong, or maybe I wasn't a good enough preacher, or maybe I wasn't what they needed me to be, or maybe I wasn't that person that could help them through something in their life. And because of that, they're never going to sit in a pew again. That's the greatest failure for me in life. Because there's nothing more valuable than a soul. There's nothing more valuable than a person. There's nothing more valuable than that. And I think of all the failures in my life, that would be the greatest failure. I know it would be. Because the soul's irreplaceable. It's so valuable. And to think that somehow I failed to deliver the message to be delivered, or to be the person that I needed to be. I lay awake at night thinking of that. You know, when you preach for a long time like I have, and you stand in front of a congregation, for 16 years now, I think I've preached here. You know where people sit, or where people used to sit. You look for people to come in the door. People that you know. You look for their face. You look for them to come down the hallway because you want them to be here. And you want to think that you make a connection, or that there's some reason they want to be here, to hear something, or to be involved, or you want to, and that is something that I continually do. And in my mind at night, when I lay and I think of these pews, and I pray these pews, and I know where you sit, and I know your faces and where you belong, and when you're not there, that bothers me. And I know there's a lot of reasons for you not to be here, and I understand that, but why is it that failure always overrides our success? Have you ever noticed that? You know, you can go through a day and do 100 things right. Can't you? And then that one thing wrong when you hit that tree, right? That one thing wrong, right? It ruins your whole day. Might ruin your whole week, right? I mean, how many days of my life have I had a good day? And I think, man, I've done this right, and this right, and this right, and this right, and something happens and it just ruins my whole day, right? And that's not unique to the world, not unique to people. There was a man in the Bible, a prophet named Elijah, and Elijah had these real victories. You know, he prayed for this drought because of this evil Ahab. This is the days of Ahab and Jezebel, and he prayed for this drought, and this drought came, and God sustained him through the drought. God, the miraculous widow's oil, and the oil never ran out, and the flour never ran out, and God sustained him through the drought. And then he challenged the prophets of Baal, and he challenged those prophets, and boy, God delivered. God destroyed, burned up his altar and destroyed the prophets of Baal, and man, everything seemed to be going Elijah's way, and big thing happened, big thing, right? That's a big day. That was a good day, right? I mean, he challenged them, and he put water on the wood and 3 or 4 times, and God just devoured it, and man, he looked like the man, right? I mean, my God's my God. Look what he can do. You know, your idol's nothing. And then it was in the middle of this drought, and so Elijah prayed, and there was this cloud came up, and the drought broke, and we talk about him in the book of James, where it says, Elijah was a man like unto us, and he prayed, and it rained. And you're thinking, man, Elijah ought to be on top of the world, right? But Elijah was scared for his life. Elijah had to run for his life, and he was scared that they were going to kill him. He was scared he was going to be destroyed. And even though he did all these great things for God, and he had all these successes for God, he was still scared for his life. And so he runs out into the wilderness, and he gets underneath this tree, and he sits underneath this tree, and he says to God, he says, while he himself went a day's journey to the wilderness, he came to the broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. You know, it's funny how that one thing can just ruin us, isn't it? One little thing can ruin 1,000 good things. One failure can destroy 1,000 successes. I think it's part of life, isn't it? It's part of how we perceive things. It's how we perceive our value, isn't it? Sometimes people will be down, depressed, and, oh, I can't do anything right. You ever said that? You ever say that to yourself? I can't do anything right. I'm not worth anything. You ever say that? I'm not worth anything. Not worth a plug nickel. That's what they used to say, right? And you get down on yourself, and somebody will come along, and they'll say, well, you know, you did this, and this was good, and you know, you did this, and this was good, and you did this, and this was good. And it doesn't seem to make any difference, does it? Because you're just focused on that one bad thing, that one thing that you did that was wrong. It just begins to absorb us, doesn't it? So how do you get over that? You know? How do you get over that idea, that feeling of failure, that feeling of inadequacy, maybe I would say, that you're not good enough, right? That you're never going to be good enough. That whatever you do, it's not right. How do you get over that? And as I thought about that a little bit, I thought about Christ. And I thought about what I just showed you about his life. You know, I wonder if Jesus ever got down I wonder if he ever said, man, nothing's going my way. Those Pharisees don't listen. Those Sadducees don't listen. Right? Everybody's doubting me. Nobody believes. They're just bothering me because they want me to do stuff for them, but they don't really get it. I wonder if Jesus ever got a little depressed about that. I wonder if Jesus ever thought, man, this isn't going the way I thought it would. You think Jesus ever said that? I just wonder. He was human just like us, right? He struggled just like we struggle. And if I'd have been in his position, I think I might have got a little down a few times. I think we see it sometimes if we really, really look closely at what Jesus says. If you look at John chapter 6, where Jesus challenges them about eating my flesh and drinking my blood, and Jesus is giving this challenge, and he says, unless you do that, you won't have eternal life. And it says many of them weren't following him anymore because they couldn't understand it. They couldn't comprehend it. But you get a little bit past that passage down the end of John 6, and Jesus looked at his apostles, and he says, do you want to go away too? You know, that's one of them places in Jesus' life that I think he was probably a little down. He had all them people that were following him, all the people that were hanging on his word, and he said this, and they all left. And if you kind of read between the lines, Jesus looked up and he says, do you want to go too? Those who were closest to him, the apostles that knew him, that loved him, that he spent time with, he says, do you want to go? And I just wonder if he even looked up at him, if he even looked him in the eye. And Peter says, Lord, to whom shall we go? We've come to believe and know that you have the words of eternal life. You know, one thing that gets us through failure is the people who love us in spite of our faults. The people who love us in spite of our inadequacies. The people who say, I'm beside you, even if it's not good. That really helps us to get past this despair, get past this failure. You know, Elijah's in the wilderness, and he's had these victories, but now he says, take my life. And you know why he does it? Because he feels like he's the only one. He's the only one. Just take my life. I know better than those that come before me. But you know, if you read the story, and I'm not going to read it to you, but you read this story, you know what God tells him? God takes him up to the mountain, he puts him in the cleft of the rock, and God passes by him. And God shows him his presence, that he's not alone, that God's with him. But you know the other thing he says? He says there's 3,000 that haven't bowed their knee to Baal. He says you're not alone. How many winners are there in a race? How many winners? One. Right? How many losers are there? Everybody else. Am I right? You know, when you fail, you're not alone. We fail every day. I fail to be the father I should be. I fail to be the husband I should be. I fail to be the preacher I should be. I fail to be the person I should be, almost on a daily basis. But the truth is that I'm not alone. And the people who love me and my God who loves me, they're beside me regardless of my failures. Because that winner, every once in a while, maybe you're that one guy, but generally you're everybody else, right? Or I am. Sometimes I'm last, right? But God still loves me. And the people who know me still love me. What does it mean to be successful? You know, I wish I'd had to just write this down for me and just put it on a blank piece of paper and everybody could just hand it to me at the end, because I would like to know everybody's view on exactly what you think it means to be a successful person. Because I'll bet you, even though a lot of us would be similar in what we believe, a lot of us would not be similar in what we believe. What's your measure of success? Your title? Your job? Your possessions? How do you measure your worth? Is that your worth? Is that the sum of what you are? No, it's not. What's true success? Is it happiness? Is that success? To be happy? To be peaceful? Maybe? Contentment? Is that the measure of success? Contentment? You know, as I thought about that, and I said, Rex, what is it? What makes you successful? How would you measure it? And I said, you know, the only thing I can come up with is one thing. Whatever that is to you, to be successful means that you accomplish the goal, doesn't it? It means that you accomplish what that is that you hold to be your success. If you accomplish that, you're successful. Isn't it that way with anything? If you're taking a test, if you pass the test, you've accomplished the goal. If you have a job and you do what's required, you've been successful in it, haven't you? You've accomplished what you need to accomplish. I don't consider myself a successful person for the most part, because it seems like I have a lot of goals that I've never accomplished. Man, I think maybe that's okay. I think maybe that's okay in life, you know, to have physical things, like I would like to get this done, I would like to do this. I think that's okay, maybe not to do all that, and I'm all right with dying and not having accomplished everything in my life that I wanted to accomplish. I'm okay with that, you know, because I think worldly success and spiritual success, you know, I think we got to hold them on two different levels. And even though I think it's good maybe to be successful worldly, I think it's a lot more important to be successful spiritually. I think my overall goal is to get to heaven. I hope that's my overall goal. That's the goal I really want to achieve in life. If I can achieve heaven, I think I'm successful. I think I've been successful in life if I can achieve eternity. You know, when I look at Jesus and I say, was Jesus successful? And I'm like, absolutely. You know, I don't think anybody in here, if I said, was Jesus successful, everybody in here would say, sure. Why? He didn't have anything. He didn't really, right? Why was he successful? And you know what you're going to tell me? Because he accomplished his goal, right? Everything else is irrelevant. He had one goal in life, and that was to reunite us with God. That was to die on that cross. That was to start what we are. That was his goal. And he accomplished that. Was Jesus successful? Absolutely he was successful. He did exactly what he came to do. It says in Hebrews, it says, since we have such a great cloud of witness surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. You see, to be successful, you have to have a goal. To be successful, you have to have a finish line. You have to have some point in your life where you say, I was successful in that. I did what I said I was going to do. I crossed the finish line. I accomplished my goal. And Jesus, when he hung on that cross, as sad and as tragic and as terrible as that was, Jesus accomplished the goal that he set out to do. He was successful in his life by his death. So, I mean, I guess you could say we could measure success in a lot of different ways. I guess we could say we all have a lot of failures. I think that's safe to say that. Times we don't make what we want, don't accomplish our goal, don't accomplish our mission. But I think the most important thing in this is what's our spiritual goal? You know, like I said, I can live with not accomplishing a lot of the physical things in this life because I understand there's a lot of those things that I'm never going to accomplish. I'm never going to get that done. And I know I've had a lot of failures. But what does it mean to be spiritually successful? You know, if I want to be successful in one thing in my life, that's it. I want to be a successful Christian. I want to be successful with God. That's what I want to do. And so I say, what does that mean exactly? What's the goal? What's the finish line? And you say, well, it's heaven, Rex. It's to get to heaven. And I agree with that idea. But I think there's also goals on this earth, goals that God would have us do to be a spiritually successful individual. And so I thought, what are those goals? I need to see those goals because I want to be able to think, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that. I want to be successful. I want to be a spiritually successful individual. And so when I thought about that, I thought, you know, Rex, the first thing is you need to sow seed. You know, so many times I think my failure is that I don't get more people to believe in God, to respond to God, to be obedient to the gospel. But when I really thought about it, I thought, you know, Rex, God didn't say to make sure people are saved, to get them to that point. He said to sow the seed. Isn't that what Paul said? He says some watered, some sowed, some watered, but God gives the increase, right? My job is to sow the seed, not to judge where it goes or who hears it, or my job's to sow it. And I thought, that's a goal I can accomplish, right? Because I can't guarantee you that everybody that hears God's word is going to be saved, or everybody's going to accept Christ, or everybody's going to be happy about it. I can't. If that's my measure of success, I'm going to fail. That pew's going to be empty because I know I'm not always going to be able to make that happen. But this goal of sowing seed, I can do that. I can do that. That's a goal I can do. Don't you think that God gives us achievable spiritual goals? I think he does. And I can do that. I can do this. And so I think that's one thing. And the next thing is to obey God. You know, isn't that what he said? Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, right? Matthew 7. But those who do the will of my Father who is in heaven are going to enter. You know, so my goal is to sow the seed of the kingdom, and my goal is to obey God. I can do that. I can do that. That's doable, even for last place Rex. That's doable, right? And my overall goal is to get to heaven. You know, Jesus said, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross and suffered his shame and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. You know, I think this has been the hardest 3 weeks of my entire life. The last 3 weeks of my life, I can just about tell you, beyond a doubt, they've probably been the hardest 3 weeks of my entire life. I've had more stuff go wrong. Those of you that know me know part of it. But I've had more stuff go wrong in my life. I lost my father. I've had more setbacks with work and other things. Can't begin to imagine. And you know, sometimes you just lay there and you think, why, oh why, oh why, right? You know, why do you fail? Why do I fail? Sometimes I tell Susie, I said, you know, I work harder than anybody I know. And it seems like sometimes it just doesn't make any difference. It's easy to get down. It's easy to get depressed. It's easy to think, you know, that you're the only one. But you know, at the end of the day, when I lay my head down at night, I know that God loves me. I know my family loves me. I know you love me. And I know I'm going to go to heaven. And you know, everything else in life is just stuff, people. I mean, I know it doesn't feel that way. Trust me. I know it doesn't feel that way. But everything else in life is just stuff. You know, my dad always told me one thing, I guess his words of wisdom. He always told me one thing. All the time he would tell me one thing. He would say, you know, 100 years from now, nobody will know the difference. And that's true. 100 years from now, nobody's going to know the difference. Nobody's going to know Rex ever lived or walked on this earth or stood in this pulpit, or nobody's going to know and nobody's going to care. But God, right? But eternity. So at the end of the day, the only thing I really want to be successful at is God. Everything else, it's just stuff. Am I a failure? Top of the heap. Top of the heap. Does God love me? Absolutely. Am I going to heaven? You better believe it. Because this world, I'm telling you, is not Rex's home. But I have a home. And I hope you do too. If we can help you in any way, won't you let it be known while we stand and sing?